Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. So, over the weekend, Saturday, I made a nostalgic trip to North Vancouver, to Lynn Valley in particular, where I lived for some years as a child. And this involved a LRT or SkyTrain, as it's called here, a trip of 40 minutes to Waterfront Station. Now, the trip was very different on Saturday than it would have been on Monday. Why? Because as of today, all transit in the public transit in the lower mainland, that includes the SkyTrain and its various lines, buses, the C bus, which goes from Waterfront Station to the Lonsdale Quay in North Vancouver, which I took on Saturday, and ferries. Now, this is absolutely preposterous. Absolutely preposterous. We're going to start wearing masks now. Well, how bad is the situation here? Well, as of Friday, there were 13 people being treated in British Columbia hospitals for COVID-19. 13 people. British Columbia has a population of 5.1 million people, and as of Friday, 13. Oh, and you know how many are in intensive care? 5. And Premier of British Columbia, John Horgan, who has been, I have to say, less crazy than a lot of other premiers in Canada, certainly less crazy than my old friend Jason Kenney in Alberta. But, and now, so more than we have ever served before, because, I don't know, that second wave, the second wave is coming. Well, there is no second wave. Like health authorities have simply decided that we're just going to rub it in. We're going to rub it in that they're in charge and we are not. And Premier Horgan has made it clear that people are, they're being irresponsible. And so he has passed a host of laws against irresponsible behavior, which involves, among other things, going to parties. No parties. You can't go to parties, and people will be arrested. They will be arrested and fined if they go to parties. Let's see. This is from today. BC health officials announced 269 new cases of COVID-19 on Monday, bringing the province's total to 5,184 cases since the pandemic began. 5,184 cases, most of which are asymptomatic in a province of 5.1 million people. Oh, let's see. The number of people currently in hospital has zoomed up to 18 people, 6 of whom require critical care. Oh, well, yeah, I'm getting different numbers here. 18 and 6. Yeah, 18 and 6. So what is the point of this new mask directive? It's the idea that people are going to wear masks permanently now. I have to say that the situation in Vancouver is much different than it was in Victoria. I saw many more people wearing masks in downtown Vancouver than in downtown Victoria. An astonishing number of people wearing masks outside, which is obviously completely useless. Let's see, what does Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry have to say? She says that right now we are staying in the range where we need to be. However, she said that more can be done by individuals to limit the spread of COVID-19, including physical distancing and contact record keeping. We need to detect new cases as quickly as possible, she said, stressing that contact tracing is a crucial tool in helping limit coronavirus transmission. Despite the recent outbreaks and clusters that we have seen in the rise in case numbers, we still have case detection in our province. She said that public health teams would be more worried about the recent rise in cases if the source of each case was not being found. And exactly how do they find the source of each case? Health Minister Adrian Dix added that British Columbians should continue to follow basic health measures. When case counts rise, I think it's true for all of us not to finger point, not to blame. Oh, no, not that. Not to worry. Oh, really? But to recommit ourselves to the actions that have shown can limit the spread of COVID-19. Well, good luck proving that the partial lockdown in British Columbia had anything to do with the number of cases. While BC announced new fines for hosting parties during the COVID-19 pandemic last week, health officials say they are more interested in managing the virus than shutting down gatherings or businesses. We need to figure out how to do all that we need to do in our society for the next year or maybe even longer, said Henry. She added that the province was much more confident in its COVID-19 safety measures now rather than when the pandemic began because health officials now know more about the virus. Apparently, they haven't learned that there is no proof of the efficacy of masks, none whatsoever. We didn't know how much it was circulating in March and April, said Henry. Of course, that didn't stop them from formulating policies based on thin and bad data. BC's top doctor says the province knows more about how the virus behaves and is transmitted, and health officials have been able to find which health measures have been the most effective, again, like physical distancing. Yes, let's see, getting off subway trains, getting on and off ferries, no chance of physical distancing there, is there? She added that having businesses and restaurants create their own COVID-19 safety plans has helped control virus transmission. Okay, a European study shows that the risk of getting COVID-19 from a train journey is approximately 1 in 11,000. 1 in 11,000. Of course, the SkyTrain is simply a train system. The longest ride possible is 40 minutes, which is significantly less time than most train journeys. But it doesn't matter. We all have to wear masks now in order to show that we care, that we're all in this together. Of course, we're not all in this together because, of course, each of us represents a terrifying threat to every other person on Earth. And people who don't wear masks, they are wicked, wicked people. Apparently, they want to kill everyone else. Again, and I'll point out, no evidence whatsoever that masks are efficacious. For more bedwetting news, we find out that it's a no-win situation. These parents won't be sending their kids back to school. We have the evidence regarding COVID-19 and children. It's not a threat to them. They are not secret or super spreaders. In fact, it's the threat is more likely the other way around vis-a-vis the teachers. But the teachers are determined to be the wokest of the woke with regard to COVID-19. If they end up destroying the education system as they have destroyed the economy, well, I guess that's the price that has to be paid, because one can never be too careful. This is a story, I can hardly believe this, but this has been true of so many stories this year from the CBC. If a crisis like COVID-19 hasn't pushed government to take action to improve broadband access, what can? Lack of affordable quality internet across country keeps families from meeting basic needs like education. This column is an opinion by Aaron Knight, a digital rights campaigner at Open Media, which works to keep the internet open, affordable, and surveillance free. When COVID-19 struck, the internet was the seatbelt that stopped us from catapulting through the windshield. What? No. No, the internet was the means used to terrorize the populations of all of the countries in the West. Oh my God, the count is up to this. Oh, the number of cases is this many. Oh, the number of deaths is this many. How many people would have normally died in this day, week, or month? What's the fatality rate of this disease? We know from polling that such has been the destructive power of the internet in this regard that Americans seem to believe that 9% of the population has died from COVID-19, which would be more than 30 million people. By mid-March, Ms. Knight continues, workplaces have gone remote, schools moved to online learning, and video conferencing became the best, safest way to stay in touch. But 1 in 10 Canadian households still have no internet at home, relying on mobile, work, school, and libraries for basic connectivity, which raises the question, who's being left out of the new online normal? Unsurprisingly, it's disproportionately people living in rural and remote areas, low-income families, and Indigenous people. Just as, yes, unsurprisingly, indeed, I would suggest that people whose access to high-speed internet is a priority, these people would most likely choose to live in major cities. Would they not? No. Let's find a way for the government to spend even more money, having wrecked the economy. Oh, even for those who have a connection, it's often slow. Only 41% of connected rural households are able to access the minimum speed targets. 50 Mbps download, 10 Mbps upload, outlined by Canada's connectivity strategy for First Nations reserves. It's closer to 31%. Yes, we can see just how terribly important this is. I just, whatever happened to herd immunity? We hate herd immunity. Is that the idea? We want to keep people isolated for as long as possible, thus eliminating the prospect of building herd immunity. And again, we see a great increase in cases. Well, is there a great increase in medical treatment? Is there a great increase in deaths? No, there is not. And what does this prove? It proves that for the vast majority of people, COVID-19 is not a serious risk to them. But good luck expecting the media to tell us about this. How are things COVID-19 wise in Britain? This is from the Daily Mail. 9 out of 10 people in England live in areas that haven't seen a COVID case in a month. And fresh lockdown based on dodgy data is not needed, professor says. This professor is John Clancy from Birmingham City University, has warned that fears of another shutdown are based on dodgy data. He wrote on a blog, 91% of England, that's 51 million people, live in neighborhoods where there hasn't been a recorded COVID-19 case in the last 4 weeks. He added, so-called spikes are occurring here, there, and everywhere up and down the country because new testing regimes are causing them either with false positives, picking up residual infections, or usually more likely, suddenly increased testing in specific areas. It comes as 6 more people died yesterday after contracting the disease all across all settings, including care homes, hospitals, and the wider community, bringing the UK's total death toll to 41,429, which of course is nowhere near to the spectacular death toll that was forecast by Professor Neil Ferguson and Imperial College London. Oh, they're going to blame their lockdowns for this. But as I predicted, going back to March, regardless of the effects of the lockdown, and even to the extent that they can be measured, they're going to be patting themselves in the back, congratulating themselves for what an outstanding job they have done, and demanding even more powers in the wake of this disaster. I mentioned Premier John Horgan. He tweeted, "The vast majority in BC have been working hard to keep each other safe. But a small number of people threaten to erode the progress we've made in controlling COVID-19. We're enacting new measures to take action against those putting other lives at risk." What about all those months when people were going to the grocery stores, liquor stores, other stores, and physical distancing, of course, is pretty much impossible because people are crossing aisles, and people were not forced to wear masks then. In fact, they're not forced to wear masks now in these places. So why would it be increasingly necessary now and not then? BC police make arrest, issue second fine at same apartment building. Just after midnight on Sunday, police were called back to the same apartment in the 1000th block of Fort Street. It was about 6 blocks away from where I lived in Victoria for a year and a half, up until April. Disappointing. This was necessary, but we will not stand by and let a small number of people undo the hard work of British Columbians to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Thank you to the vast majority of people doing their part to keep each other safe. What does this talk about hard work? The hard work of not going to work and being paid for the government not to work? That hard work part of it? The part about many people never leaving their homes? Is that particularly hard work? I wonder. I wonder how this is all going to play out, because especially in my country, there is no understanding, certainly no understanding in the media, government, academia, of the catastrophe this has been to the Canadian economy and to the social structure of this country. It's not even being considered seriously. Apparently, everything is going to be all right. Why people would come to this conclusion, I can't possibly imagine, because we've yet to see the full results of this. Let's go to the chat. Heck McNecky goes a little nuts when Greg refers to himself as doctor. Does Greg Johnson refer to himself as doctor? Really? Visionary Companion says Greg's musical tastes are similar to mine, and I like his movie reviews, even though I don't agree with him about everything. Is that a pint of tea? It is a pint of tea. I drink tea in, as a mug, a pint mug, as you can see, and I drink it Russian style, just the tea. I know Russians often add sugar, but it's just the tea for me. Chogokin666 says, at least Canadians get free money with their mask idiocy. We just get the idiocy. Visionary Companion, Greg used to live down the road from me, and I sympathized with him when he was terrorized after he was doxxed at the gym where he was a member. Anrun says, hey, we got $1,200 back in April. What more do you want? Metal Mike says, the flowers have changed position again. Yes, I'd like to keep you all off balance. Dawn from Beyond says, I'm so mad right now. My grandson enters first grade next Monday, social distancing and face masks, Central East Florida. And then an epithet, I'm fighting it at least to get the little guy an exemption. Chogokin666, Kevin, do you believe that the elite believe their own bullshit, or is there an echelon that doesn't and just issues these directives for reasons? Well, I've spoken of the Schrodinger's cat aspect or mindset, I suppose you could say, of our elite. That on the one hand, people who go to parties are wicked, 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 wicked people. On the other hand, thousands, tens of thousands appearing in peaceful protests against whatever they're protesting against. These are not wicked people. These are righteous people. Metal Mike, are you going to discuss Aaron O'Toole? Sadly, I will. Sadly, I will. Joking 666, New Yorkers have the pleasure of continuous mask announcements from Rosie Perez in English and Spanish. Her English is not so good. Am I right about that? Visionary Companion, I'm constantly taking the mask off when I'm out walking. I do not see the point of wearing it when there is no one within 50 feet of me. As I mentioned last week, because I'm living in a new area, it's unfamiliar to me. It's also very different in its layout. This is the suburbs with a vengeance I am living in. Every street appears to be 4, 5, or 6, or even 7 lanes, and it's mall after mall after mall. Shopping at Walmart, and Walmart, as of August the 12th, I think it was, policy. And I have found that I really do not like wearing masks. I feel as if I'm suffocated as the area around my mouth and nose becomes exceedingly moist, wet, hot. And I can hardly wait to leave them pulling off my face and be able to breathe. Visionary Companion, greetings from Seattle. Robin Angelo lurks. Don't know who that is. Herd immunity begins with just like that hydro drug that doesn't swim. That's from Ann Run. Chicken 666. Anyone who hasn't realized COVID is total is imbecile. Well, my father had it, and he died from it. Seems to be an involved question. Over the 85. But sadly, these people would pretty much at the same time. Anyway, what was particularly their family members, they were infected by government policy, and recently was the second worst city in the world. USA was in the pack overall. They were canceled for 2 classes of disease. There was COVID-19 and everything else in the world. And was cancer. Well, people were shaking their fist at cancer for years. People were shaking their fist at cancer for years. They had these rallies, and boy, we're going to show cancer's boss when COVID-19 shows up, and cancer. Well, that. I'm going to talk about had an interest in him. Jonathan Ball says, yes, Greg Johnson refers to himself as doctor, but he is gay. The rest of us real men with PhDs are okay. I'm talking about Richard Spencer, and we know someone who has a job offer, chance to move his family to uptown Portland, said they told him looking for good people. But he said, sound far enough from the festivities. 669 Rosie Spanish, being terrorized by someone who will not stop vacuuming. Robin D'Angelo is the academic who wrote White Frigidity. Thank you for that. Extreme turbulence. Well, I don't know what I can say about that. I really don't know what I can say about that. I've done what I can. A story from the CBC. This happened. Father attributes death to COVID-19. Ogden says the clot that his son might have. The 19-year-old had a big present. The 19-year-old had a big presence. His father, he was a gangster, a one-of-a-kind. Somebody if he'd known them for years. People remember the young man's outgoing at his funeral this week. He died in a Calgary hospital last Saturday after collapsing on a run. His father was able to be by his son's side. He said a major blood clot had formed around a stent placed in his son's aorta. The stent was necessary after he survived a serious highway accident on his way to work last year. It was a miracle, really. Ogden said while in hospital before his death, his son told him he was supposed to go for a CT scan in June while living in Saskatchewan near Yorkton. It was a routine checkup on the stent, but the appointment was postponed because of restrictions around the COVID-19 pandemic and never rescheduled. I didn't think nothing of the time, but I mulled it over as we watched him decline. Ogden said, "It hit me. He was trying to tell me this shouldn't have happened." The father believes that had his son's scan not been canceled, doctors might have found the blood clot in time. Ogden wants all postponed hospital procedures done immediately. People's lives are being lost. He said these COVID rules are way too far. He believes the Saskatchewan Health Authority bears responsibility for his son's death. Somebody needs to be held to account. I'm finding out, hearing of many stories of people going to hospitals with respiratory illnesses, and hospitals attempting to persuade them that they had COVID-19, even when they don't. That pneumonia kills people. Actually, pneumonia kills a lot of people. But pneumonia, I mean, who worries about pneumonia now? Well, actually, old people worry about pneumonia rather a lot, because they're tremendously at risk for it. Typically, pneumonia is a grave threat to people with a compromised immune systems. This is from Theophilus Chilton. He says, "By the way, just heard this from a man in my church. His son began having upper respiratory symptoms a few days ago, so he got tested for C19. Test came back negative. He went to a local clinic after symptoms got worse. They tested him for C19, also negative. They waited a day, tested him again, still C19 negative. They thought he might have pneumonia, so he was admitted to hospital. Hospital puts him in C19 ward despite 3 previous negative tests. Give him another C19 test, still negative. Hospital diagnoses him with bacterial pneumonia, prescribe him antibiotics. However, hospital refuses to move him from C19 ward, leaves him there another day. After this, they give him a 5th C19 test, still negative, still refuse to move him to a non-COVID ward, despite telling him they would. Demands to be moved, refused outright. They plan to test him a 6th time, so he refuses and walks out. He says they were strongly seemed like they were trying to infect him with C19, likely because they get more remuneration that way. They never did give him his antibiotics for the pneumonia, despite this being the diagnosis based on his culture that came back. That is what happens when you incentivize hospitals to find more COVID-19 cases. Well, as I say, that's the disease. That's the serious disease. Every other disease is very much in second place. But of course, people are going to die from all the other diseases more than they're going to die from COVID-19. But, a great many people die of cancer, diabetes, pneumonia, et cetera, heart disease every year. But they are not extinction level events, as COVID-19 was said to be. So, Zoom for children. And what does that mean? Well, I guess it means that school officials are looking into your house. They're looking to see what might be on the walls around your child's workspace. And there has been complaints that children might have inappropriate things. I don't know, MAGA signs, crucifixes, crosses, whatever. But teachers are put out because apparently parents now are aware firsthand of the propaganda that their children are subjected to. This is from the Rayfield.com. A school district in Tennessee is facing criticism after parents were asked to refrain from listening in during their children's online classroom instruction. Rutherford County Schools in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, had asked parents to sign a form agreeing to give teachers privacy with students. The district soon came under fire and retracted its stance, asking parents not to listen to what their children were told during virtual classes. Parents are now no longer being asked to stay away from participating in the educational experience of their children. We are aware of the concern that has been raised about this distance learning letter that was sent to parents, said School District Communications Director James Evans. We have issued new guidance to principals that Director James Evans. We have issued new guidance to principals that parents can assist their children during virtual group lessons with permission of the instructor, but should refrain from sharing or recording any information about other students in the classroom. Roughly 20,000 of the district's 48,000 students are learning from home. On August the 8th, a Pennsylvania teacher called Matthew R.K. complained online with other teachers that distance learning would prevent him from speaking to kids about subjects such as diversity, gender, and sexuality. Yeah, that would be a shame. That would be a shame, wouldn't it, if he were prevented speaking to children about diversity, gender, and sexuality. Do you think our public school system has been taken over by leftists? Quote, so this fall virtual class discussions will have many spectators, parents, siblings, etc. in the same room. We'll never be quite sure who is overhearing the discourse. What does this do for our equity/inclusion work? How much of students depended on the somewhat secure barriers of our physical classrooms encourage vulnerability? How many of us have installed some version of what happens here stays here to help this? I wonder if he's ever heard of the phrase in loco parentis, which means that teachers are considered to have guidance over children in the absence of parents. They are not supposed to replace parents. Well, conversations about race are in my wheelhouse, they aren't special, and remain a concern in this no-walls environment. I'm most intrigued by the damage that helicopter/snowplow parents can do in honest conversations about gender, sexuality. Kay added his concern was conservative parents overhearing his discussions with their children. This seems to be exceedingly interested in talking about sexuality and gender with children. One teacher who chimed in on Kay's now private post, which is archived here, wrote, in my district, we already have and file a complaint against teacher for an anti-racist read aloud. Read aloud? Is that a phrase that's being used now? Saying the teacher comment is inappropriate and biased. It's going to be an issue for sure. Another self-described teacher added to the discussion, I'm also worried about kids who are out at school but not at home. What happens when another parent hears them referred to by their preferred name pronouns and shares with the parents? Why would they want to keep all this secret if they weren't worried that there was going to be a rebellion by parents, if they weren't worried that things that they were saying were totally inappropriate? If nothing else, COVID-19 has resulted in parents knowing a great more about what goes on in schools than they had known previously. Aronson has to say, here's a comment on Jerry Falwell. Look, to be honest, for anyone who is paying attention to this Falwell stuff, the biggest surprise is that young John Carlo was banging Becky and not Jerry Jr. Oh dear, oh dear. Oh, a second coronavirus death surge is coming. This is from Alexis C. Madrigal back in July the 15th. There was always a logical explanation for why cases rose through the end of June while deaths did not. You get the impression they're a little disappointed. Quote, that was not my prediction. Sure, screenshotted. The article's not at all alarmist headline and some of its greatest hits. The inevitable reference to refrigerated morgue trucks. The logic that 550,000 deaths was no more unthinkable than the then current figure. Do you remember when everyone in the southeast of the United States was going to die? Do you remember that? Didn't happen. Berenson writes, hey, Alexis Madrigal, now that your prediction in the Atlantic, the sun might have 550,000 COVID deaths is proven off in a month by 10 times, more really, but who's counting? Any chance you'll walk the little people through what went right for the world? If not you? And right on schedule, COVID deaths have plunged in Arizona, down 50% from peak, and Florida down 30% in a week. 7-day moving average, no change. Nationally, the second driblet peaked 3 weeks ago, and we're now down 15%. The reality is, if the media hadn't screamed for 2 months about the impending apocalypse in the Sun Belt, it is unlikely anyone outside of somewhat strapped hospital staff would have even noticed. Attention citizens, your Department of Pandemia reassures you that in these uncertain times, your safety is paramount for your health, which is even paramounter. We are all in this together. But remember, anyone not wearing a mask hates you and hopes you die. Attention, citizens. Ventilators. Yes, Berenson's been having a lot of fun with ventilators because you might remember, I'm sure this is disappearing down the memory hole, that America needs ventilators. Come on, Trump, where are those ventilators? The federal government ordered General Motors and other companies to make ventilators instead of, automobiles, because ventilators were essential. Cannot get enough ventilators. It turns out there's tens of thousands of these machines moldering on shelves right now because there was no need for all these ventilators. Berenson says, no, there was no rationing of ventilators. However, many patients, we don't know how many, and unless we independently investigate hospitals in New York City, etc., we never will, but many died after being needlessly intubated. Well, you know the old saying that if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail, and I think a similar thing happened with ventilators. We have these ventilators. I mean, we got to use them. Simply be wrong, irresponsible, not. I'm looking at a very sad picture here from Britain of a classroom where I see 4 students in it. They look rather forlorn, perhaps because a little cubicle with plastic and see-through plastic has been erected around them, and they're wearing masks on top of it. But children are more likely to die of flu than COVID, according to the Deputy Chief Medical Officer of England. The long-term harms of children not attending school significantly, we think, outweigh those potential risks. No environment is completely risk-free. Thank you for that, Dr. Harris. Every time a parent sends their child off to school pre-COVID, they may have been involved in a road traffic accident. There are all sorts of things. In fact, that risk, or the risk for seasonal flu, we think is probably higher than the current risk of COVID. This message was complemented by the Times front page story this morning, which says teachers spread virus more than pupils. Golly, how about that? Lockdown will come to be seen as a monumental mistake on a global scale and must never happen again, says Mark Woolhouse, a scientist who advises the government on infectious diseases. He said the lockdown was a panic measure, admitted it was the only option at the time because we couldn't think of anything better to do. We've got to do something. The doctors used to take what they call a Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. Well, I guess if there's a rush to do something, anything, then the injunction against doing must go out the window. But the lockdown is a crude measure that takes account of the risk levels to different individuals, the University of Edinburgh said, meaning that back in March it was concentrating on schools when we should be concentrating on care homes. Exactly. The very worst policy was taken because the first priority should have been to protect the vulnerable or those over. Because the first priority should have been to protect the vulnerable or those over the age of 80. Instead, vulnerable were deliberately affected due to a government policy. Yes, and I'm looking at you, Love Gov, Andrew Cuomo, and then left to die alone and in terror. And meanwhile, everyone who was at risk from cause of abating. According to an alarming story in The Telegraph by Sarah Napton, the science editor, 1 in 10 care home staff members change do not resuscitate plans without discussing them first with family members, nursing staff, or residents. Again, COVID-19 has resulted in very old people, geriatrics. These draw a lot in terms of pensions. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that there has been something of a genocide of them all across the West. A couple of days ago, Toby Young writes, I've been flooding in. And Lynn writes that her husband has Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it's one of 5 million people who were sent a long, terribly concerned letter from the government strongly urging him to stay at home until they decided to venture out again. In the first of lockdown, he discovered a lump neck, and after some he tried to see our local GP. The surgery was abandoned by all the doctors who we were told were working from home. The doctor ran Muslim the following day for a consultation, no Zoom and no access to his medical notes. However, due to his history, the doctor agreed to for my husband in Chelmsford. After 2 weeks, we discovered that he'd been referred back to the GP. We tried again, and another referral was made, which was taken more seriously. Since then, he has had a PET scan showing areas of concern and 2 biopsies. The day came, but no phone call when they're supposed to get the results. We rang them only to be told he had done. Needle aspiration instead of core biopsy, and a new one biopsy would be done on August 5th. He was now officially a fast path patient, and we were promised a phone consultation to discuss the results on August 20th. Again, no call, no results. My husband first made contact with the GP on April 9th. It is now nearly September, and he is yet to see a medical professional, and we know no more than we did in early April. The stress and anger this has caused us, me in particular, are impossible to describe. My husband is an otherwise fit, healthy 60-year-old and father of 2 teenage children. He hasn't missed a day of work during this whole time, keeping a small manufacturing company going without any redundancies or furloughs. I feel like I've woken up in a parallel universe where the normal citizenry have been turned into obedient Stepford wives, and the government and its institutions are these smug husbands. We are at sea in a sinking boat drifting further from shore, whilst the lifeguards look on shrugging their shoulders before turning away to deal with a couple of cases of mild sunburn. I don't feel I can ever love my country again. There's a fascinating Twitter thread by Michael Singer about how the Chinese Communist Party launched a massive disinformation campaign in March, urging governments around the world to impose full lockdowns. It links to plenty of evidence, such as a piece in the New York Times about how the CCP used fake Twitter accounts to amplify tweets praising China's response to the pandemic in early March. I think Richard Spencer is a big fan of China's response. We'll be getting to him in a couple of minutes. The day after that Times article appeared, Twitter suspended more than 170,000 suspicious Chinese accounts, but according to Singer, many of these accounts remain active. For instance, when the governor of South Dakota refused to shut down her state, her Twitter feed filled up with thousands of abusive messages from these accounts. By contrast, the accounts he praised on governors who tightened lockdowns, like Dan Andrews, governor of the state of Victoria in Australia. Here's another interesting datum. When comparing the deaths per million in U.S. states run by Democratic governors with run by Republican governors, quote, first day of quarantine from Mallorca, I thought I'd amuse myself by looking at U.S. state stats by political affiliations. Deaths 67% higher in Democrat states, deaths per million 41% higher. Cases actually higher in Republican states, all the data from Worldometers. Looser lockdowns in Republican states and the fact that many are in the South explain it, I would think. However, if I were the US president, it's something I'd be flagging daily in the run-up to an election. Obviously, it runs counter to the media narrative. And, Sweden's declining case numbers are due to herd immunity, according to the London Times. Figures from the European Centre for Disease Prevention that the infection rate in France is more than 60% higher than that of Sweden. France implemented a strict lockdown in the spring and requires masks to be worn in many public areas, but has a fortnightly infection rate of 60 cases per 100,000. Sweden, which decided not to implement compulsory measures at that time, and which rejected the use of masks, has a rate of 37 cases per 100,000 people. The government is reporting between 200 and 300 new cases a day, with deaths down to 3 last Friday. Anders Tegnell, the Swedish state epidemiologist leading the response to the pandemic, has noted, based on the statistics, that infection rates increased in countries such as Spain, Belgium, and France during and following the mandatory wearing of masks in many public areas. The belief that masks can solve our problem is very dangerous, he said last week. And he has a interesting essay on why lockdown skeptics seem to be all on the right. Brexit voters in Britain, for example, Trump supporters in the United States. It really annoys me that lockdown skeptics are so often dismissed as Tory voting, Brexit supporting, libertarian sympathizing, white, middle class, middle-aged gammons. Okay, yes, that's me, but there are plenty of other skeptics out there who don't fall into any of these categories. And what's really infuriating is the assumption that anyone on the left should be a lockdown zealot. Why? As each day passes, more evidence comes to light that the lockdown has caused disproportionate harm to the most vulnerable people in our society: children, the elderly, cancer patients, the BAME community, not vulnerable patients, the BAME community, not vulnerable, obviously those suffering from mental illness, goes on. What about the catastrophic economic recession we'll have on the world's poorest people in the developing world, with hundreds of now likely to tuberculosis, dysentery, etc.? Are left people now just expected to sign up to the prayer of safety first and to hedge against lockdown? Well, when I was a young man, it seemed that the left was an enemy, concentration of government power, but the left is, for the most part now, an ally of the concentration of government power. Guess what? Because they control the governments. They also control the media, academia, and big business. So I guess that explains it. More than anything else, they're in charge, and we are all going to feel their wrath. There's no escaping it, just as apparently there is no escaping the mask madness. Let's talk about Richard Spencer. On the previous live stream I did with Luke 4, there was a lot of talk about Richard Spencer and a lot of playing of a audio clip of him screaming obscenities. I must confess that I have had little interest ever in Richard Spencer, and frankly, I don't think that there are all that very many people interested in him, or more to the point, see him as any kind of political force. What would lead people to think that Richard Spencer could persuade anyone? Would it be his efforts to reconstitute the Holy Roman Empire with himself as Kaiser? Would it be his brave stand against monotheism? I'm at a loss. Paul Joseph Watson writes at Summit News, White supremacist Richard Spencer has publicly endorsed Joe Biden for president, leading Trump supporters to wonder if the media will ask Biden to disavow Spencer as vociferously as they demanded Trump disavow David Duke. I have to weigh in on this. I just think that this is stupid, this disavowal. It's very simple to point out, I am not supporting them, they are supporting me. If you run for president, there are tens of millions of people who are going to vote for you. The idea that they must be vetted is absurd. Spencer was asked on Twitter if he was going to vote for Biden, given his belief that Biden-Kamala will be tougher on crime, BLM, than Trump. He responded, I plan to vote for Biden and a straight Democratic ticket. It's not based on accelerationism or anything like that. The liberals are clearly more competent people. This exchange prompted Spencer, who supported Trump in 2016, but has since been given a platform by the likes of CNN to criticize the president, to immediately beginning trending on Twitter. Richard Spencer is an unapologetic neo-Nazi, writes Andrea Whitberg. He's forever seen giving Nazi salutes, quoting Nazi propaganda, and making openly anti-Semitic statements. Spencer was also a leading figure at the August 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, which was attended by neo-Nazis. Both the media and Biden have amplified the fake story that Trump described neo-Nazis attending Charlottesville as very fine people, when in fact Trump specifically disavowed neo-Nazis in the same breath. Yes, George Washington and Robert E. Lee are not the same, reporter said, and Trump, quick as a flash, says, oh no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down his statue? He was a major slave owner. You know what? It's fine. You're changing history. You're changing culture. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group, too. When Donald Trump was endorsed by David Duke in 2016, the media never let it go, repeatedly asking Trump to disavow the former KKK leader. Trump's entire campaign then became dogged with the narrative that he was the candidate of choice for racists, white supremacists, and neo-Nazis. One wonders if the corporate press will show the same level of enthusiasm in asking Biden to distance himself. For Spencer, don't hold your breath. And, okay, Dinesh D'Souza, who is what the king, the Raja of DR3. Dems are the real racists. Anyone on the left who claims white supremacists are for Trump with nothing more than an old photo or anecdote to prove it must now contend with the fact that the poster boy of white supremacy, Richard Spencer, has announced he's voting Biden and the straight Democratic ticket. Again, the media has a vested interest in talking about promoting Richard Spencer because he makes the right look bad. He's supporting Joe Biden. Joe Biden is an internationalist, a neoconservative in foreign policy. He is invade the world, invite the world. And the straight Democratic ticket. So that means all of the crazies that the Democrats are going to nominate. Richard Spencer is going to support them. Spencer tweeted on January 7th of this year, I deeply regret voting for and promoting Donald Trump in 2016. Yes, trying to keep alive this myth that Richard Spencer had anything at all to do with the election of Donald Trump. What did he write in March 12th? Actually, China's strong, centralized measures allow them to contain the virus at the point of outbreak. Whether free market healthcare can address a public health emergency is the question at play, and it ain't looking so good. Richard Spencer loves scale. he publicly praised the Tower of Babel. Why would anyone be against that? No, let's just build up to the heavens. Let's just put everyone in the world next to each other. Let's have a riot, thousands of tongues, no common language, no common culture, no common anything. Just scale, scale, scale. And of course, Richard Spencer is a coronavirus bedwetter. Of course he is. Of course he is. See what else he has to say on his Twitter feed. Okay. He seems to take a position against the housewife in St. Louis. She and her husband both came out with weapons to defend themselves from a mob, as opposed to the martini drinking Biden moms, wives. Someone's made a meme. I'm on Team Joe. Richard Spencer. Liberals are clearly more competent. Text Joe to 30330. Okay. Oh, yeah. Who is this? Hunter? That guy? What's his name? Yeah, I know who he is. He seems to be well behind Richard Spencer on this. I've learned something from that experience. The idiots who wanted to trigger the libs cost us dearly. Yes, I wonder what he means by us then. He is really embracing this, I have to say. I guess maybe people are talking about Richard Spencer again. And let's see, in March he wrote, when Trump was called a fascist by his enemies, the slander reinforced his core message and attraction to millions of people. He's a nationalist tough guy. Today he's perceived as a buffoon, tweeting about Hillary's emails and stocks while an existential crisis unfolds. With all this in mind, I'm not afraid to say Trump will lose the 2020 election in a monumental landslide. Is he going to claim credit for that too? Should it happen? Yeah. You become addicted to publicity, you lose your dignity. And I can't think of, well, and I'm looking at a picture of David Duke here. When was the last time that David Duke had any kind of influence? And I can't think of, well, and I'm looking at a picture of David Duke here. When was the last time that David Duke had any kind of influence? What, in the 1990s, before he went to prison? And he gets trotted out for the same reason that Richard Spencer does. Let's go back to the chat. Don from Beyond, recently upon entering Walmart neighborhood market, employee asked if I had a mask. I said, no, I have a medical exemption, thank you, and entered unopposed. Same thing at Family Dollar. Jim Smith says Richard Spencer supports the same candidate as William Kristol and Bob Avakian of the Revolutionary Communist Party. I don't know. I think this is rather working out well. You may have seen there was a list. Was it over 100 supposedly national security experts? Many of them ostensibly Republican who were supporting Joe Biden. Well, good riddance to bad rubbish. These are the people who are consistently dragging America into stupid, pointless, forever wars, and they're supporting Joe Biden, which is very, very good, because the difference between Trump and Biden couldn't be made any more clear. That is going to be, the second round of Obama, only more so. Only more so. And I'll be talking about the future of the right shortly. The magic words are, I have a medical exemption. My doctor told me not to wear a face mask. Here in the US, HIPAA, these privacy laws, forbid anyone to question me further. Jim Smith, according to Wikipedia, Greg Johnson has a PhD in philosophy from Catholic University and taught philosophy for 3 years at Morehouse College, an historic black college. John Jonathan Paul says, my daughter in Kyrgyzstan wears a U.S. flag mask to class. Hot towel. Okay. I've never been compared to a hot towel before. I don't actually know what a hot towel is. Okay. Oh, the University of Jonathan Paul says, I have no Wikipedia page, but I have a PhD from SOAS, University of London, and taught history at the University of Ghana and HBCU for 5.5 years. Okay. Why isn't KMG wearing a face mask? Hasn't he heard from the WHO, who changed their minds multiple times, but now know that not wearing masks is a conspiracy? Again, I see people wearing masks outside, particularly, when the wind is blowing. And I think, what is wrong with these people? I may have mentioned this before. One of Michael Crichton's books, he describes this curious phenomenon where you will see people taking pictures of the sun using a flash. The range of a flash is up to 10 feet. The sun is 93 million miles away. Is the principle the same? It couldn't hurt. Well, it's just a waste of, battery power, because it's not going to reach the sun or anywhere close to it. Let's see. Jonathan Paul, my former office mate in Kurdistan, is in trouble now for promoting Turkish racism against Kurds. Ich sage Schadenfreude. Mike F., a waterfall, his madrigal, an inland sea, his symphony. John S., hey, it's not like a government would just knowingly turn children over to pedophiles, right? Contra Coup says, insinuating that physicians are needlessly intubating COVID-19 patients for dubious reasons is nihilistic and completely off the mark. I called out a guy at work today, says Glib Medley, about excessive mask use. He defended it by comparing mask use to the shopping cart in the parking lot dilemma. What is that exactly? Contra Coup, the patients who get intubated for COVID-19 are the sickest, and more often than not would likely die in minutes or hours otherwise. All right. Glib Medley says, there's a study out there where they put breathable cloth over newborn babies' mouths and noses. Black and white babies struggled to remove them, but Asian babies were fine with them. Kenosha is really getting live. Armed protesters standing against cops, courthouse on fire, and the graffiti. Jim Smith says, I think Spencer has made himself irrelevant. He got 75,000 tweets on his Biden post. I suspect a great many of those people retweeting him, which I may have done myself, were simply looking to embarrass him and Joe Biden. Kamala is going to be hard on crime. Well, she was hard on crime in the past. She sent people to prison for smoking marijuana. Well, allegedly was smoking up and listening to Tupac, even though Tupac wasn't around at the time. That's to say, he hadn't come on to the scene because, she's black. Well, a quarter black at most. And she's just trying to appeal to the brothers and sisters by, I guess, speaking of what are supposedly traditionally black things, like getting high on dope and listening to the sainted Tupac. Okay, yes. Someone was, there's a joke going around the internet that of all the, the first government employee that should be fired because of COVID-19 is Richard Spencer. Oh, Jonathan Paul, who is Bobo Nick? Bobo Nick is Richard Spencer's lefty girlfriend. Did she not? She was listening to Smokey Robinson at her age, not Tupac. I don't. Why is it, Barack Obama brings out these playlists every month or so, and they are, how could I put it, carefully, exquisitely curated that he wants people to think that he is so into music and his tastes are so broad, and just everyone who's on this list is the sort of person that want to be on a curated playlist. I don't believe these lists, for the reason that real music lovers have curious choices on their lists. And these lists from people like Obama, they never have curious cases. For someone to come up with a list such as Obama has, he would have to be spending a lot of time listening to music, and I think listening rather carefully. That is to say, oh, yeah, I like that song. Who is that? That sort of thing. There's nothing in Obama's life that suggests that he is capable or willing of giving that kind of attention to anything, that he has any interest in culture of any kind, high or low. Jim Smith, I once read an article about David Duke in the Weekly Standard. At one point, Duke had to excuse himself and invited the reporter to look around the house, whereupon he finds among Duke's records. Okay, how does it end? What do you think about Mike Enoch's National Justice Party? Well, nothing. Jonathan Pohl says, a real list has Iron Butterfly, Blue Cheer, and Budgie on it. Budgie were a three-piece, a power trio, I suppose an early metal band from Wales, if I'm not mistaken. Shopping cart dilemma, Glib Medley. Do you accept your duty to return the cart even though you gain nothing? How it relates to mask wearing is elusive. I've seen various measures to attempt to prevent the theft of shopping carts. The latest one I've seen is that the wheels will lock once they pass by some invisible barrier. I like that idea, actually. Philip Daniel says, supposedly Obama likes the music of Aaron Copland. Really? Because that's the sort of thing one would expect him to say. Because Aaron Copland wrote, pieces about America. His dude looks like a lady on Michelle Obama's list. All right. Okay, let's get back to it here. Yeah. I read Jim Kunstler's piece today, and I thought, I'm going to have to disagree a little bit with Kunstler here because, he is invested in certain ideas. That's to say, ideas such as obvious craziness will not be tolerated. Whereas what we're seeing in 2020 is that obvious craziness will not just be tolerated, it will be celebrated. And the question is Joe Biden going to be allowed not to run a presidential campaign at all? Is he going to get away with it? His column today is called Biblical Travails. It's looking a little bit like the nation's attention to the Republican Trump-Orama Fest this week will get shoved rudely aside by Hurricane Laura, currently tracking to make a direct hit on New Orleans and then beat a path up the south central USA, drowning croplands clear into Kentucky and Ohio. The internal quarrels of the GOP will have to take a backseat to disaster relief. It might be a political blessing for the president unless he blunders through the event, George W. Bush style. Remember, Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job, apropos of then FEMA chief Michael Brown, who herded thousands into the NOLA Superdome, which quickly turned into a Lord of the Flies horror show of administrative incompetence. I know just what America needs, another biblical scale natural disaster, with COVID-19 apparently fermenting in the new air conditioning units all over Dixieland and plenty of summertime left to breed up new plagues of mosquito-borne illness in the wake of Laura's flooding. And of course, the hurricane season is only beginning. Such are the Job-like trials of America as we slide into something that quacks like collapse. Could the country even stand another full-on political convention after the Democrats' nauseating extravaganza last week? The nation is so marinated, agate prop, disinfo, and straight-up mendacity that all the intelligence has been leached out of the population, perhaps even the will to live. A Republican convention, complete with the usual showboating, might deplete the remaining OxyContin supply across the land, as unemployed millions mulling over rents overdue and unmet car payments resort to vodka, Xanax, cough syrup, and plain glue to quell the pain induced by unbridled political bull. BLM might say, no wump saying. Speaking of BLM, Sunday, one Jacob Blake, 29, was apparently shot in the back of police in Kenosha, Wisconsin, while getting into a car. The Saturday night of BLM rioting and looting in down Kenosha, with excellent prospects for violence to spread to other cities. Blake was hospitalized and survives. He was not complying with police instructions in the process of his arrest. He had been arrested previously in 2015 and charged with brandishing a gun in a barroom. Upon his arrest then, the gun was found on the floor of his car. In the latest incident, Kenosha police were responding to a domestic abuse complaint. There was an active warrant out on Blake. Also over the weekend, police in Lafayette, Louisiana, shot and killed 31-year-old Trayford Pellerin outside a convenience store he was entering while brandishing a knife. They had followed him from another convenience store in the vicinity where he created a disturbance with a knife. Pellerin apparently refused to comply with police orders to get on the ground. Ben Crump, a civil rights lawyer hired to represent the Pellerin family during the investigation into the shooting, said his family believes that he was suffering a mental illness crisis and what he needed was a helping hand. But what he got was what looks like 11 bullets. His mother told the Associated Press that Pellerin had sought therapy for social anxiety, a helping hand. Yes, when you put up a helping hand or two helping hands against someone waving around a knife, you are liable to receive what's called in the trade defensive wounds. What to make of all of this? The common denominator seems to be that a failure to follow the instructions of police can lead to serious injury or even death, especially if you are carrying a weapon or have a previous arrest record involving a gun. But never mind that inconvenient reasoning. Two fresh martyrs on the scene assure a new round of mostly peaceful protests. The Democratic Party is sure to play up the tragic injustice of police violence against Black Americans. The rioting and looting will continue until the unblack demographic of America gets its collective mind right and abolishes police altogether. Or perhaps, instead, decides to not get hustled anymore and votes against the race hustlers. So far, candidate Joe Biden hasn't offered any commentary on these incidents or on anything else since going on his exhausting performance last Thursday. The Hurricane Laura situation plus the Republican convention will give him another weekend to rest up in the basement. Long about mid-September, voters might begin to wonder if his handlers will ever subject him to any public appearance or scrutiny of the news media, most of which will function anyway as an arm of his campaign press office, with or without the candidate. Sometime in October, if he's still alive, Biden may emerge from his hole in the ground like fellow Pennsylvanian Punxsutawney Phil. If he sees his shadow, it'll be back to the basement until November 3rd when the ghastly business is finally over, or else, and pretty soon, the party will have to anoint a replacement. Again, Kunstler's planted axiom there is that, well, the Democratic Party, the media wouldn't let Joe Biden get away with actually not running a campaign. And I really think that they will let him get away with not running a campaign. I used to read Reason magazine cover to cover decades ago. I suppose I still had some vestigial attachment to libertarianism in those days. I don't see it much these days. But I did see this story from 4 days ago by Robbie Soav. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey donates $10 million to Ibram X. Kendi, who wants to make racism unconstitutional. Did I just read that? Seriously, did I just read that? We're going to make racism unconstitutional? Let's see. This was a donation to Boston University Center for Anti-Racist Research, a project recently launched by the aforesaid Ibram X. Kendi, which of course is not his name. Kendi is the author of the 2019 book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, one of two books that attracted renewed attention following the death of George Floyd. The other is Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility. In a tweet, he thanked Dorsey for the grant, which came with no strings attached. Dorsey replied that he hoped the center's research would inform and fuel much needed and overdue policy change. In a 2019 piece for Politico, Kendi proposed a constitutional amendment that would prohibit racism. Here is his idea in full, quote, "To fix the groan, boo-groan hiss, original sin of racism, Americans should pass an anti-racist amendment to the U.S. Constitution that enshrines two guiding anti-racist principles. Racial inequity is evidence of racist policy. No, it is not, but never mind. And the different racial groups are equals. In what way are they equals? Perhaps that should be made clear. The amendment would make unconstitutional racial inequity over a certain threshold, as well as racist ideas by public officials with racist ideas and public official clearly defined. It would establish and permanently fund the Department of Anti-Racism, DOA, comprised of formally trained experts on racism and no political appointees. The DOA would be responsible for pre-clearing all local, state, and federal public policies to ensure that they won't yield racial inequity, monitor those policies, investigate private racist policies when racial inequity surfaces, and monitor public officials for expression of racist ideas. The DOA would be empowered with disciplinary tools to wield over and against policymakers and public officials who do not voluntarily change their racist policy and ideas. I'm looking at a grinning picture of Ibram X, who I guess seems to be in a good mood these days, and I suppose it's not really much of a surprise. I am looking forward to the day when Ibram X and all of his ilk come up with these fatuous ideas, such as making racism, whatever that might be, unconstitutional. And the overwhelming response to such initiative is go piss up a rope. Okay, let's talk about the future of the right. It's a piece in Spectator USA by Sohrab Ahmari, who is the op-ed editor of the New York Post. And it's about woke conservatism. Two broad camps divide American conservatism today, those who get it and those who don't, the woke and unwoke, if I may borrow a lefty term, but give it a slightly different meaning. For the right to have any shot at taming liberalism's raging furies, woke conservatives must remain ascendant and consolidate the movement. Well, this is off to a bad start because conservatism is owned. That's why they call it Conservatism Inc. It is owned by people like George Will and Bill Kristol and Size E Cup and the like. Conservatives, the beautiful losers, San Francisco called them. They once were beautiful losers, perhaps. They are still losers, but have not been beautiful for a very long time. They're just born losers. They love to lose because they get patted on the head by the left, and they get thrown doggy treats in the form of sinecures of various sorts. President Trump was among the first to get it in his own intuitive, messy way. The ambitious Missouri Senator Josh Hawley is likewise woke. So are Attorney General Bill Barr and Fox News host Tucker Carlson. But too many credentialed conservatives don't get it. Yes, because they're conservatives. What does the conservatives need to get? Can't we just call them the right wing? Would that be so hard? Thomas Sowell, what did he write? 25 years ago? Like, how much would need to be done for there be anything left for the conservatives to conserve? Because it's all gone. We have teachers saying that, public school teachers saying, we can't have parents listening in to the Zoom sessions with the little boys and girls because they might hear us talking about gender and sexuality, and they might not like that. Is this the system that the conservatives want to conserve? What, public health teachers are, they're the bedrock of America? I'm sure if they're not saying that yet, they will be saying it soon. I have no doubt that the Bill Kristols and George Wills of the world are saying it right now. What's the conservatives need to get? It is simply this, that the political left neither loves you nor shares many loves with you, certainly not the love of neutral norms and procedures that have long been the stock in trade of the center-right establishment. This is more to the point. If the left, the progressives, whatever you have it, if they had a motto, it would be same as Al Davis, the longtime general partner of the Oakland or LA Raiders. Just win, baby. It comes down to that. Just win. Or to put it slightly differently, I believe it was Jesse Jackson said, it's not over till it's over, and even then, it's not over. Partly owing to the shock electoral successes of populism and partly to liberalism's own inner logic, the left has now abandoned all the old procedural niceties in the corridors of power, in the press, in the street, online. To be sure, some moderate liberals still mouth the old rhetoric, free speech, free inquiry, etc., and get canceled for their trouble. But what their movement as a whole seeks is the brute enactment of substantive liberal commitments. The left has a crystalline moral vision, moral by its own lights at any rate. To the liberal mind, norms and procedures are worthwhile only insofar as they help advance this vision. If existing norms and procedures fail to do that, well, new ones will have to be found. The point isn't to uphold some neutral ground that different groups might contest with winners and losers periodically switching places. The point is to win decisively. Unwoke conservatives still labor under the quaint impression that a golden age of procedural liberalism can be restored, provided the right is winsome enough. They have no vision of the good society to rival the left's. How could they if their foremost obsession is how laws get made rather than what they contain or whether they promote the common good? No, this is a good point because, no, the conservatives, they don't have anything to offer. They don't have a vision of a common good. What do they believe in? They believe in choice. They believe that choice is the highest of virtue. So is it possible for the notion of a good society to even exist in a world where choice is the highest virtue? No, I don't think so. Nor do these conservatives love their natural constituency, the working classes of all races. The effects of this asymmetry have been especially glaring lately. In recent months, the left has used the coronavirus pandemic to enshrine what amounts to a new caste system, tightly regulating who may or who may not legitimately exercise historic American liberties like freedom of speech and assembly. The sheer unfairness of it all, not least the mainstream coverage, is a deep source of conservative heartache. I see that Omari here, he's has his habit of slipping into DR3 himself. And conservatives whining about the unfairness of the left. Haven't they got it yet? Whine all you like, conservatives. It's not going to make any difference. But they're not playing by the rules. They're winning, aren't they? As if some sort of cosmic referee is going to say, well, so I'm afraid we're going to have to roll back all your victories for the last 50 years because they were illegitimate, because you were breaking the rules. That is not how it works. It isn't fair, and there are several paragraphs of it isn't fair, with recent examples, which I will not go into. And on and on. It isn't fair is the constant refrain on the lips of unwoke conservatives. They aren't wrong, but their whining is downright lame. And once they're done whining, they invariably follow up with the same old tired appeals. If we could just write a persuasive public letter signed by 50 prominent men and women of goodwill, making sure to criticize excesses on our own side, the other side will see that we must turn back the clock to better days. Remember 1984? Remember the 90s? Weren't those better days? Did I tell you, young staff editor at Jacobin magazine, about the personal friendship between Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill? To this kind of sweet nostalgia about the tone of public discourse, unwoke conservatives typically add arguments that assume the other side's premises, but then suggest that the right offers the better way to reach the left's aims. Nice one. To take but one of numerous examples, when Trump used his executive authority recently to break the Democratic gridlock hindering coronavirus economic relief, the unwoke right was on hand to say, yes, we agree Trump was wrong to do that, which is why we've always been opposed to the use of executive authority on constitutional grounds. Liberals pocket the concession, knowing full well that they will use executive power in just the same way the minute they regain the Oval Office. The contrast with conservatives who get it, the president, Hawley, Barr, Carlson, and a few rare others, couldn't be sharper. These men don't agree on everything, to be sure. They are woke, but in different ways, emphasizing diverse issues and commitments. What they share, what makes them woke conservatives, is their willingness to deal with the balance of American social forces as it really is, rather than as they might wish it to be. They recognize first that corporate America, especially the largest firms that dominate the internet and culture industries, actively supports the left's social and cultural agenda on everything from policing and gender ideology to abortion and immigration. Whatever the cause, I expect it has to do with more than just executives following trends. It's a reality. Woke conservatives see it clearly because they aren't blinded by the pro-business dogmas of the past. I suspect that if the Conservatism Inc. ever won any kind of real substantive political victory, there'd be a last minute attempt to invalidate it, saying, you see how Article 2, Section 3, C1, you see that comma there? Well, see, that makes what we just won to have been obtained illegally. So, we must be fair here and give up that victory. I'm sure that the left would do the same. Now, if they wouldn't do the same, that's on them. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. Okay. Hang on just a second here. Let's go back to this. My apologies. Oh, and we get some pop culture reference here, which I'm not happy about. The Bill Barr wing of woke conservatism, time Attorney General looking appropriately enough like a walrus and the Thing from Fantastic Four, as revealed the partisan liberal activist hiding behind the mask of stolid, gray-haired national security professionals. His vow, still not completely fulfilled, to get to the bottom of the various collusion hoaxes has made him an object of fear in Washington, and that's as it should be. We need more bars. Unwoke conservatives shrink from this hard work very well. They either give way to the ascendancy of the woke brethren or learn to enjoy themselves in the wilderness for a generation or longer. Sohrab Ahmari is the author of the forthcoming The Unbroken Thread, Discovering the Wisdom of Tradition in an Age of Chaos. Again, this may seem like a peccadillo, but I just think that it is a grave mistake, a critical mistake to continue to use this word conservative for lots of reasons. That conservatism just has the stink of failure surrounding it. It has the stink of hypocrisy. It has a stink of venality around it. Also, ownership is claimed by a bunch of people who are not going to surrender ownership. I mean, you could point to George Will, Bill Kristol, and that whole ilk, what the Lincoln Project, the Reagan Brigade, that these people represent what? A couple of percent of the political opinion? Popular opinion in the United States? Well, they are not letting go of conservatism without a fight. So let them have it. Who cares? It's not a good brand. Not a good brand at all. I don't know whether you have been following the drama surrounding Claudia Conway, who is the daughter of Kellyanne and George Conway. Kellyanne being a senior advisor to Donald Trump. I must say that I was quite shocked when I started seeing pictures of Claudia Conway appearing in news stories, because she is supposed to be 15 years old and she does not look 15 years old. That is to say that she looks as if she is in her 20s. I really fear for this girl, really, making TikTok videos with her twerking, apparently twerking as a political act. This was before the latest news. Kellyanne Conway's anti-Trump child Claudia has declared she wants to legally divorce her mom. This is from the U.S. Sun, after learning she is to speak at the upcoming Republican National Convention. She made the bombshell announcement as she denounced her mother's job as all about money and fame. I've been using social media as an outlet to express my passions, individuality, ho-ho, and to shed light on some hardships. I have been vulnerable for a reason. Thank you for supporting me. I'm officially pushing for emancipation. Buckle up, because this is probably going to be public one way or another. Unfortunately, welcome to my life. I'm devastated that my mother is actually speaking at the RNC, like devastated beyond compare. Yeah. Selfish, she says. And also, Claudia has gone well beyond the permatan, that she looks barely human, the hue of her skin in these pictures. My mother's job ruined my life, Claudia wrote on Twitter on Saturday night. Heartbreaking that she continues to go down that path after years of watching her children suffer. Okay. Yes, sharper than a serpent's tooth is an ungrateful child. Claudia also admitted she was a savage and agreed with her dad on absolutely nothing, despite the fact that he was the founder of an anti-Trump conservative super political action committee. The push for a divorce from her parents comes after she asked progressive Democratic New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to adopt her. The rebellious teen who said she backed Joe Biden has unleashed several hits at her mom and dad and Trump on social media. Earlier this month, Claudia claimed that her mom had her arrested in a TikTok video after she said that she needs a lawyer. She also slammed Trump for using the racist phrase, China virus. She is one of 4 Conway children, including her twin brother, George. So what are we looking this girl's facial expressions, and she is on a crash course to dissolution and death, as I see it. But of course, there is breaking news on this story, which is that her mother has resigned. And I don't know, women's places in the home, they used to say, I can't help but think that if this unfortunate girl had been actually raised by her mother instead of strangers, this unpleasantness would have been far less likely to happen. According to AP, Kellyanne Conway says she's leaving the White House at the end of the month. She was Trump's campaign manager during the stretch run of the 2016 race. She cited a need to spend time with her 4 children in her resignation letter posted last night. Her husband had become an unspoken Trump critic, and her family a subject of Washington's rumor mill. I don't know that, again, these battles between husband and wife over politics, with these savage statements being made, well, by the husband, not so much by her. It's just, Chesterton said that women's suffrage was a very bad idea because it would divide families on the basis of politics. And this is a perfect example of this. It is not, we disagree about plenty, but we are united on what matters most, the kids. Kellyanne Conway wrote, for now and for my beloved children, it will be less drama, more mama. I could have done without the attorney. Kellyanne is still slated to speak at the Republican National Convention this week. Her husband, an attorney who renounced Trump after the 2016 campaign to become a member of the Lincoln Project, an outside group of Republicans. Yes, a bunch of creeps and traitors devoted to defeating Trump. The politically adversarial marriage generated much speculation in the Beltway and online. I suppose Conway could have asked or begged or demanded that his wife stop working for Donald Trump. I suppose she probably would have said no. In that case, George Conway would have been best advised to shut up about Trump in public, because this is all so tremendously bad for this marriage, and indeed exposed both of them and their children to things which should have been kept private. Conway cited a need to help her children's remote learning during the coronavirus pandemic as a need to step away from the position. Her departure comes at an inopportune time for Trump, who faces a deficit in the polls as the Republican National Convention begins on Monday. I suppose this is really a horror story. It's a horror story for so many parents. That 15-year-old, this is what 15-year-olds sound like. It's not just they sound like that, but they've gone public with this kind of thing. It's just horrifying, absolutely horrifying. There have been a great many people who have taken great delight in the suffering of Kellyanne Conway, which I don't know. I suspect that they don't have children themselves, or else they wouldn't do this. But perhaps, Schrodinger's cat, they wouldn't want to happen to themselves, but they're perfectly happy for it to happen to other people. And Matt Taibbi expressed the belief that this, I don't know, beating up on Kellyanne Conway is an example of a cult behavior. That she has to be a bad mother because she supports Donald Trump, which is obviously not true. Obviously not true at all. But can't let reality stand in the way of politics. I mean, actually, I've heard such as the cynicism today that I've seen it suggested that what the Conways, they have some reality show in mind. I don't know how people could. Does Kellyanne Conway, does she need the money? Does anyone need the money that much? I suppose some people do, but the whole point of reality shows is to humiliate oneself in front of as many people as possible. And simply, a Twitter account and TikTok was enough for Claudia Conway to make an ass of herself. And oh, well, here's the latest news. Look what I did. Claudia Conway gloats over mom's resignation. She may be irredeemable. I don't know. What do you think? There she is, TikToking it up, boasting about ruining her mother's career. I thought that, aren't we all feminists now? Aren't we all supposed to support women working, particularly, being strong women, strong political women? I guess that doesn't apply to people who support Donald Trump. Let's see what the chat has to say. Her hubby reminds me of Michelle Bachmann's hubby, says Metal Mike. He's such an obnoxious man. What is their problem with Donald Trump exactly? Well, right near the top of the list seems to be is that he's not killing enough foreigners. And progressives are very keen on killing foreigners, as many as possible. Not just killing the foreigners, but inviting the survivors to our country and then hoping that they don't bear a grudge, which is rank foolishness. Don from Beyond, I saw a good bumper sticker today while doing DoorDash deliveries. I have PTSD, pretty tired of stupid Democrats. That's one of the internet that they call boomer tier. AP, seems like offline meetings without technology present need to start occurring to hash out some options. Political life is soul cancer, said David Wright. Media hits, Black lesbians matter. Let's have a male White House press officer, says Claire Kaw. I suppose it's easier for the women because there's still a residual feeling that, one should be mean to women. Okay. I had the shock of seeing Claudia's public outburst. She looks like she has been around the block enough times to make furrows. She does, yes, that's, there was simply, again, a level of maturity, if you like, or simply of having been around the block, that she looks a decade older than she is. Again, I just see it as being shocking, But in other Zoomer news, this is a real story from the Daily Mail. Stop the full stop. Punctuation symbol is intimidating to young people who interpret it as a sign of anger, linguists say. Language experts have claimed that young people find the full stop intimidating as it's seen as an anger in text messages, and as Generation Z, teenagers or those in their early 20s, have grown up in the age of instant messaging, the punctuation mark is no longer commonly used. Linguistic experts from across the world have been investigating the purposefulness of the full stop as communication habits have evolved. Dr. Lauren Fontaine tweeted, "If you send a text message without a full stop, it's already obvious that you've concluded the message. So that if you add that additional marker for completion, they will read something into it, and it tends to be a falling intonation or negative tone." The picture of Dr. Fontaine from Leiden, presumably that must be Leiden University, quite an attractive woman, and Owen McArdle, who is a grown man wearing a football uniform, advertising for some product. This is a selfie he made in the bathroom. According to the Telegraph, linguists are divided on whether the full stop has become redundant, given that text messages are concluded by pressing send, so there's arguably no need for the full stop. Now, someone's going to mention that I do not use the full stop at the end of my Twitter messages. I do this for the same reason that I use ampersands instead of the word and. It is simply to save characters. There's no other significance. Owen McArdle, a linguist at Cambridge, told the Telegraph, "I'm not sure I agree about emails. I guess it depends how formal they are. Generation Z does not send emails," is my understanding. Full stops, in my experience, have a new role in signifying an abrupt or angry tone of voice. In 2015, a study from Binghamton University in New York suggested that people who finish messages with full stops are perceived as insincere. The study involved 126 undergraduates, and the researchers found that text messages ending in the most final of punctuation marks, e.g. LOL period, let's go to Nando's period, send nudes period, were perceived as being less sincere. Unusually, texts ending in an exclamation point, LMAO, just a cheeky one, what body part even is that, I hope it's your arm, are deemed heartfelt or more profound. Research leader Celia Klin said at the time, when speaking, people easily convey social and emotional information with eye gaze, facial expressions, tone of voice, pauses, and so on. People obviously can't use these mechanisms when they are texting. Thus, it makes sense that texters rely on what they have available to them, emoticons, deliberate misspellings that mimic speech sounds, and according to our data, punctuation. I have been told for quite some time that no young people use the smartphone to actually make phone calls, that is considered to be ridiculously passé. Well, obviously, the best form of communication is person to person in the same room. The second best form of communication is voice communication. Purely textual communication is the very worst form of communication because it is so easily misinterpreted. But I'm really supposed to believe that Generation Z, they find the use of a period or full stop to be nothing less than a microaggression, perhaps more than a microaggression. Aaron O'Toole was elected leader of the Conservative Party of Canada yesterday. I must alert listeners to the fact that despite the fact that this person's name is spelled E-R-I-N, this is a man and not a woman. And by a man, I mean what the kids are calling a cis man. I can explain this, all right? Erin literally means Ireland. So if your family surname is O'Toole and you name your child Erin, It's because you want the world to know that your child is ever so Irish. It's just absolutely silly. Just silly, silly, silly. I didn't follow the conservative leadership race very closely because nothing good comes out of the Conservative Party in Canada, just as nothing good comes from any Conservative Party anywhere in the world. Oh, the line on Aaron O'Toole is that he won by sucking up to the so-called social conservatives. Social conservatives have absolutely no power in my country. Actually, public opinion is pretty strong for legalized abortion and homosexual marriage. If the social conservatives, I would call myself that, if they really want to make a practical difference, they should come out in favor of an immigration moratorium, because the vast majority of immigrants to my country are people who wouldn't give a second thought to aborting one of their children, especially if that unborn child, was guilty of the crime of being female. You want fewer abortions and immigration. According to LifeSite News, which is a very valuable website, pro-abortion Aaron O'Toole wins Conservative Party of Canada leadership race. I should explain something about this idiocy of the voting system. The media kept talking about several ballots. There were not several ballots. There was only one ballot. It was a weighted voting system. So you had your first choice, second choice, third choice, and fourth choice. And as we have found, just as in the previous go-round, when Andrew Scheer got 20% of the vote on the only ballot, and he was behind Maxime Bernier, who I believe got 28%, Scheer ended up winning because there were 14 candidates and the ballots were ranked from 1 to 14. Yeah, actually. Oh, and also they have a points system such that there are ridings, many ridings in Canada where the Conservatives get practically no votes at all, but they were worth just as much as the ridings in which Conservatives actually win. And the strange thing is there was a black candidate named Leslyn Lewis, something like that, a woman from Jamaica, and she had actually had more votes than any of the candidates after the third round. But because of the points system, she was in third place, and so she came off the ballot. Leslyn Lewis, yes. O'Toole, a 47-year-old father of two, lawyer, former member of Canada's Air Force and Sea King helicopter navigator and current Ontario MP, won a resounding victory over acknowledged frontrunner, former Harper-era MP and Cabinet Minister Peter MacKay on the third ballot. Yes, and there was a pro-life candidate who came in fourth. Campaign Life Coalition said the results show that social conservatives continue to be a major and irreplaceable part of the CPC base. They're wasting their time, because the Conservative Party, to the extent that it exists federally and provincially, yes, we want your support. We want your money. You want anything from us? Get stuffed. We're not giving you anything. In fact, we're going to denounce you at every opportunity. Oh, yes. The party received a record-breaking 175,000 ballots, and its new leader reveal was delayed 6 hours because of a glitch with the machine opening the ballot envelopes. It was shredding the envelopes. Also, because we have these things called computers now, oh, yeah, what they did last time around, we're going to, announce the result, and then we're going to wait like 45 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes for the second round. No, it was all known right to the very end. Computers work very, very fast. And they did the same nonsense again this time. But Aaron O'Toole I went looking for any religious affiliation. One might suggest a Catholic affiliation based on his name. He doesn't seem to have any religious affiliation. Perhaps if he does, he's keeping it secret, very secret. McKay, who infamously referred to outgoing leader Andrew Scheer's personal views opposing abortion and gay marriage as a stinking albatross around his neck. That, let's see, O'Toole said, as Prime Minister, I will defend the rights of people, including women, to choose for themselves when it comes to abortion. He says that he plans to march in the pro-homosexual pride parades and that he long supported gender ideology. Well, of course he did. He voted in 2013 for a pro-transsexual rights bill. He's all about rights, Aaron O'Toole is. What is the source of these rights is a question he would not be in a position to answer. I went looking at his platform, and he's a neocon. Russia's very, very bad. Very bad. We must be on guard against Russia. Let's see. This is particularly amusing. Stand up to Russian aggression and support Ukraine. An O'Toole government will not rest until united Ukraine can take its place as an economic, political, and security partner, integrated with the wider Western world. As I never tire of pointing out, the Ukraine is such a basket case, is that its per capita income is less than half that of Belarus. Yes, that's just how corrupt the Ukraine is. And apparently Israel got to make military connections with Israel and military connections with the Ukraine. This is absolutely demented. Absolutely demented. Of course, he believes in climate change, but believes that free enterprise will sort that out. Now, of course, someone could always mention the fact that Canada is the second coldest country in the world, and that climate change, if it exists, will be good for Canadians. They will be healthier and wealthier, but no. Indicting the indigenous economy. Sorry, did I say indicting? Igniting the indigenous economy. Apparently they're born entrepreneurs. Yeah, it's just shameful, just shameful. And on immigration, Aaron O'Toole is just as hell-bent as the Liberal or New Democratic parties on replacing Canadians with foreigners. But it's got to be orderly. It has to be an orderly replacement. Yes, a system that is fair, compassionate, and rules-based. Yes, skills-based with the growing shortage of skilled workers. What growing shortage of skilled workers is he talking about? And if there is a shortage of any such workers, then Canadians can be trained to do these jobs. Oh, it's threatening the future stability of our labor force. No, what's threatening the future stability of our labor force is a lack of all sorts of jobs, particularly jobs that pay decent wages. And one of the reasons for that is because of all of the immigrants. We need to focus on attracting those with the skills our country needs. Yes, let's again replace Canadians with foreigners. Oh, and family reunification. Yes, the whole world reunites in Canada. As was pointed out to me by Charles Campbell decades ago, if there's any reunification that's going on, it should be happening back where they came from. He said to me, you live in Vancouver. What if you were at the student at the University of Toronto, and you met this girl from St. John's, Newfoundland, and you decided to get married, and you were going to live in Toronto? I said, okay. So would you invite her family from St. John's to live in Toronto and your family from Vancouver to live in Toronto? And I said, no, of course not. He said, well, that's what Canadian immigration policy is doing, and the scales fell from my eyes. If unemployment remains high in the aftermath of COVID-19, this is from O'Toole's immigration platform, it may be necessary to temporarily reduce skilled immigration, as it would be unfair to applicants that there are not employment opportunities, which makes me grit my teeth. Not unfair to Canadians who are having their wages lowered, who are being put out of work, rendered unemployed. No, it's unfair to the immigrants, because the whole point of this country apparently is to provide better lives for foreigners. If unemployment remains high, an O'Toole government would shift the immigration stream from skilled workers to a higher proportion of family reunification applicants, particularly if the applicants can help with childcare or family supports in Canada, because we want our children to be raised by foreigners. Obviously not by their parents. We wouldn't want men to earn enough money so that their wives could stay home, look after the children, perhaps work part-time. No, we need to import a helot class to Canada to look after our children. And I have to say, the horrific experiences regarding immigrant labor in old age homes in Canada during COVID-19, which the media very much doesn't want to talk about, suggests what Canada's future is going to be. And it's a very grim future indeed. So let's have a final look at the chat here. Goldberg, that would be Jonah Goldberg, says voting for Biden is conservative. Yes, I want that repeated 1,000 times. Voting Joe Biden is conservative. Just so. Because this is what conservatism has become. Oh, let's see. Let's look at the final comments here. Any which way but Conway. Yeah, I have to say so. Tricky Woo, you will only be replaced by legal immigrants. That's not exactly true, because anyone who ends up on Canadian soil, or in Canadian waters can claim to be a refugee. They are not refugees by any reasonable standard, but that's not the way that immigration judges look at them, or the immigration department looks at them. Ahmed Hussein, who is some sort of cabinet minister in Trudeau's administration, he was Minister of Immigration. He is, by his own admission, an illegal immigrant from Somalia. He became an MP, a cabinet minister, and Minister of Immigration, because it's the very strong position of the Conservative Party of Canada that immigrants are better than us. Immigrants are better than us in every conceivable manner, and they don't bother to hide their contempt for Canadians. MCT says foreign aid is taking money from the poor people of a rich country and giving it to the rich people of a poor country. Well, just so. Just so. Metal Mike says a Conservative Party of Canada rep on CBC Radio today said it's important for SOCONs to keep voting CPC, and also important for the CPC to ignore their demands. Yes. I mean, the fix has been in for 20 years now. For 20 years now. Andrew Scheer, he's a weak man. What I would have advised him to do is that when he was asked, just let it go for a little while. Let it go for about a week. When he's asked for the 17th time about his position on homosexual marriage and on legalized abortion, just to look the reporter straight in the eye and say, "Are you deaf?" And the reporter, "What? Are you deaf? What do you mean? How many times have I answered this question? How many times do you expect me to answer the question? You know my personal views on this subject. You know that I am personally opposed to gay marriage and to legalized abortion. But one's personal views are not always one's political views, and I have made it clear extensively so, and many times for years, that there will be no changing of the law under my government. And if I keep hearing this question from reporters, I'm going to have to conclude that this is nothing less than religious bias, that you have determined that someone who is a Roman Catholic cannot be Prime Minister of Canada. And I didn't know that this was now the official position of media, that anti-Christian bigotry was acceptable. That would have thrown them for a loop, I can tell you that. They would have been scrambling. They would have been howling. But Scheer just put up with it, answering the same question over and over and over and over again. And if you want to point out the number of liberals who were against gay marriage for the longest time, you could have fun with that. But the point is that you get nowhere with the media by attempting to suck up with them, by being weak with them. And Scheer never learned that. Anyway, that is the show for today. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern. Oh, yes, Matt Taby said calling for people to sever ties with family members who have disagreeable views is another way politics has become cultish. That's classic cult behavior. Someone had tweeted, let's normalize severing ties with family if they have shitty core values. Marianne Williamson found herself to be the voice of reason in this conversation. Let's see, what is coming up on Theater Thursday? A very beautiful film from 1962 about Edward Elgar by Ken Russell. And on the book club, we have a shocking, horrifying book called In Plain Sight by Dan Davis. It is about Jimmy Savile, and I should have mentioned this in the context of my review of Pierce Paul Reed's book on the Dreyfus Affair. Oh, conspiracy theories. The Dreyfus Affair was a conspiracy theory of a cabal at the very top of the French army, and eventually included senior members of the French government, up to including the war minister and the prime minister, who insisted on the punishment of an innocent man they knew to be innocent. And Jimmy Savile was a pedophile who became a very close friend of Margaret Thatcher and Prince Charles, and was given control over hospitals, despite the fact that the authorities had known him to be a pedophile for decades. It turns out that there are such things as conspiracies. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it. You would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to support this live stream with a donation, you can do so through PayPal at Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. And if you're Canadian, you can send me money directly via Interac to kevingrace@shaw.ca. I will leave you with this. In these times of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to secure a genuine emotional connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.